Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jay, here representing CodeGen, Act via Code. So I want to start with an anecdote that's it's related, but not directly to what we do here at CodeGen. So in the history of reinforcement learning, for a long time, Minecraft was an extremely challenging problem for people to solve. So you would have something that would try to solve Minecraft, the game. And after millions of iterations, it would just sort of be flopping on the floor, and it would get nowhere. And with the advent of GPT-4, this team, Voyager, Jim Fan, you might know him from Twitter and video, came out with a situation where you basically drop GPT-4 in the cockpit of Minecraft. So every time step you take what it's seeing, you serialize it to text, and you ask it, what do you want to do next? And just like Cline, it would say, oh, I want to use the step forward tool, I want to use the take out axe tool, etc. And this allowed their approach to actually completely shatter the game. And so it's no longer even a relevant baseline in the reinforcement learning literature. It turns out you just drop GPT-4 in, and it's able to solve it. But the really interesting thing is that if you just do GPT-4 raw, you get this purple line. That's a React agent, looks very similar to what Cline does. And the thing that really unlocks its ability to take actions that get it towards a goal state, like getting the diamond tool, is this idea that instead of allowing it to just take individual actions like step forward, instead you allow it to act via code. So they literally gave it a JavaScript interpreter, a little sort of code execution environment, and they gave it an SDK in JavaScript that allowed it to, I don't know if you guys can actually see this, maybe I should zoom in a little bit more, allowed it to take actions like, for example, inventory.getItem, for item in inventory, do something along those lines. So it was able to script out actions using the sort of Minecraft SDK, and then run those and do other things, like, for example, it could store these little action programs in a skill library and retrieve them when it came up against a similar task in the future. So it realized, oh, I can run this for loop that's mining wood. And when I have a situation in the future where I need to mine wood, I'll just pull out that and run that again, right? So this idea is basically if you allow a large language model, excuse me, to do things, and this is a real program that actually came from the research, to do stuff like chop spruce logs. I'm going to go ahead and count what's in my inventory, and I'm going to do a for loop here. It was able to be much more successful at playing the game of Minecraft. And the sort of revelation here is that an agent is just a non-deterministic program. It has non-deterministic control flow, which is you hit up Claude 3.7, and you decide what you're going to do next. But even non-deterministic programs have large subsequences that they themselves are perfectly deterministic. And so what does this have to do with Cline or code modification? I think this is absolutely true for code as well. When you look at a lot of the modifications we end up doing for code bases, the modification itself is actually deterministic. So show of hands, who has ever used a code mod platform before, or a code mod framework? Got like 2 or 3. The idea behind a code mod is actually not new. Basically, you can write a program that program itself will modify a code base. So the simplest version is find and replace. Find string A, replace it with string B. You've all seen this before, but there's a bunch of frameworks, including JS CodeShift from Facebook, libcst is more popular for Python, that allows you to essentially script out a sequence of manipulations of code files. And essentially the claim is that this is a more efficient way to act, and if we hope to unlock a new tier of tasks for large language models, for example, delete all of my dead code, we don't expect Cline to be able to iterate through each file in your code base and figure out, is this symbol dead or not, and then write a string to that file. Instead, we expect AI will actually act on a much larger scale by effectively scripting out actions and then executing them, and those actions themselves are perfectly deterministic. So what does this actually look like? This is the CodeGen SDK, fully open source, pip install CodeGen, and you're good to go. We provide a framework that allows you to parse a code base in memory. So we'll take your entire code base and very quickly assemble a graph data structure that represents that code base. And then we expose a bunch of high-level APIs that allow you to do modifications on top of this that you would like to see. So for example, here is the canonical delete dead code. You find all functions in your code base. You go ahead and find the ones that do not have usages, and then you remove them, just like that. And so, as it would take Cline or Cursor or something like that, if you're trying to delete dead code at Netflix, this would take forever, probably wouldn't do it correctly. Turns out this is a perfectly deterministic program, and when you allow Cline to write and execute this program, it can actually do that. So I'm excited to show you a demo of this actually happening in Cline. We all know, yeah, there we go, love to see it. We all know that demos are a little flaky, especially when it's new technology like MCP. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is, I will just take a prompt that I've run previously. Whoops. Here we go. So what I'm going to ask it to do is I'm going to say, hey, Cline, let's make a code mod with the CodeGen MCP server that moves all data classes to a file called dataclasses.py. So pretty common transformation. Essentially, I want you to go through and arrange my code base for me such that the types that I'm using are always located in a file called dataclasses.py. So I'll kick this off. And this is actually new to us as well, but when we saw this work, it was pretty incredible. So I'm excited to see what it does. It says I need to create a code mod. It's going to use the CodeGen MCP server. And it's looking at a file. It's actually looking at the server, which I have up on the right. It's doing an API request. It says, oh, I need to use the create code mod tool. It's going to create a code mod called move data classes. And it looks like this is initiated. And this is an asynchronous thing. And so it's going to start polling and figure out, is my code mod ready or not? We have a separate expert that basically lives in the cloud that will go about composing the first version of this. Give it a second. And it looks like it's still going. Status complete. Beautiful. So now it has created a file. While this is going, I can go ahead and open up over here in my diff editor. We can see it's created a code mod over here that will actually be the action program that ends up running. So you can see it's doing stuff with file.classes and decorators. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. So now it's going to run a code mod. It says I'm going to go ahead and do run code mod, move data classes. And if I go back over here to this file, wow, would you look at that? This is how many files have just been edited. If we look at each of them, I can see this thing right here, skill test case, got moved into a different file. Let's see what got added. Oh, let me see if there's one that adds something over here. Here we go. And it looks like it moved a data class into a new file. A property of CodeGen is that all of our operations are safe. And so if it's syntactically simple, you can say, hey, class.moveToFile over here. We guarantee that we go through and edit every import and every usage of that class or whatever it is that you're moving so that the code base is still passes lint and syntactically correct and the data structure of the code base graph remains consistent. So what we've just seen Cline do is make a modification of hundreds of files in my code base just by writing a single program and hitting run. And it can go through and actually make this modification, which is incredible. Now this is obviously, there's a lot of exceptions that you would have to consider when you're moving things around. And this is actually what things like Cline are incredible at, is it will run the code mod, it'll look at the output and it'll say, I'm moving things around that I don't think should be moved around, and it will go back and will edit the code mod, reset it, and run it again. So it's an incredibly large set of modifications that fall under this class are ultimately deterministic. I think one of the insights that we've arrived at is that having AI produce programs that are perfectly deterministic that you can then run is actually a really great medium for human-AI communication. The reason being, I've talked to several people, even just this evening, who say, oh yeah, my company doesn't believe in AI. They think it's so scary to have AI committing to your code base. The upside of something like this is at the end of the day, the AI you can sort of treat as a program search mechanism. It identifies a deterministic program, which is this artifact, which then there's no magic. It's just a regular program you can run on your code base. You can look at it, you can yourself edit it, you can rerun it, it runs an instance, and then you're able to commit the code to prod. Nobody needs to know that Cline built it. It's just a code mod at the end of the day. And so the last thing I was hoping to show off here is the cool thing about CodeGen is we allow you to implement your own tools. And so let's say you're engaging in some type of a refactor of your code base. You want to go through and arrange it or delete dead code. You're trying to move from styled components to Tailwind or something along those lines. And you realize, hey, every developer who's doing this is going to have to be doing the same action over and over and over again. So what you can do is you write out a very simple script. I hope you guys can see this here. This right here says split out function. So it's a very simple one. It says, given a file, I want to take all of the functions that are in it, and I want to move them into their own files that have that name associated with it. So I think Cline has a 4,000-line file or something along those lines. Very difficult to have AI edit long files as of today. They should use this. You guys should go through and actually apply this. So what this says is, hey, go ahead and get the file for a function in the file and make a new file and move it over there. Great. So it's very similar to what I just showed moments ago. And just give me 1 second to reset things. Amazing. And now I can say to Cline over here, Beautiful. So I just told it to do something that involves using a custom tool that I've written that leverages CodeGen static analysis capabilities. And we'll see in a second it will go through and it's reading this file, wants to understand what's going on, and wait for it. Split out functions. It realizes it needs to use the tool. It says target file over here. And would you look at that? This file has now been split. And we can go over here and see each one of these functions has popped into its own file. And CodeGen is smart about moving the dependencies with it, adding back edges, so the function gets re-imported in the original file, et cetera. So basically the idea here is we think that actions that language models take should be compositional. And so if Cline wants to build its own tools, if it realizes it's doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it doesn't want to have to keep writing strings in this non-deterministic fashion over and over again, it can just write a Python function, decorate it with this @mcp.tool, use some CodeGen syntax, and boom, you have something that actually ends up working. So we see this in prod today. We use this with Devin, many other things. We've implemented tools on a very high level of sophistication, including, I'll just give you a couple quick ideas. So CodeGen can be used to do advanced visualizations of code bases. This is basically computing the code base graph and then visualizing it in JavaScript. And so if you wanted to understand, what are the dependencies that are downstream of this? What are the public API endpoints that this specific function ends up being used in downstream? You could absolutely write a tool that would effectively be let Cline click on a symbol and see all of the public API endpoints that end up using this thing downstream. One of our more popular ones is feature flag removal. And so the idea here is basically you pop in a name of a feature flag, and then it will actually find every code path fully deterministically in your code base that could be removed if this feature flag was always false, and go ahead and wipe it out completely. And so you can imagine, if you're trying to implement a complex feature with Cline and it realizes at some point, this feature flag is no longer useful, your alternatives are either this thing will go off and hit up every file that it's in and try and figure out how to pull the feature flag out, or boom, delete feature flag tool, and it's out of there. So anyways, that is the long and short of it. CodeGen.com, we're fully open source. Pip install CodeGen. Try it today with Cline. Thank you so much.
Okay, give it up. That is really cool. So yeah, I was very excited when I first saw CodeGen because I was like, wait, I need that. So it's really cool to have him demo with us today. So thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to go do a quick demo for Cline. We're a collaborative coding agent, so you can use us in your IDE, and we're able to just make it super easy for you to do your work much faster. So I found out about Cline 6 months ago, something like that, and I got pretty excited right away because I was like, wait, I've tried ChatGPT, I've tried GitHub Copilot. They're okay, but what's really exciting for me is the idea that I can just let it do my whole job while I just play mobile games on my phone. And Cline can actually do that. So it's not just an agent, it's actually your partner. You can work with it to ask questions, figure out how to build what you're trying to work on, and it'll help you through the process. You'll develop a plan, and then you can execute on it, which is what I'm going to demo today. So what's very cool about Cline is, unlike some of the other tools, you can actually use it to do real work in a real repo. So all of our engineers floating around here, they all use Cline to develop Cline. So we're going to do a video demo because I'm not brave. I don't want it to fail midway. So to get started here, I have a GitHub issue for OpenRouter. I'll just pause it. For OpenRouter, where they have suffixes. And so we're going to paste the GitHub issue into Cline to actually build it. So we paste the issue in. They have options such as like floor price or nitro, which is the fastest option. And so we want to get Cline to implement this feature in Cline so that we can use the OpenRouter suffixes. So this is going to require us to do a prompt where we say we need some checkboxes. We're also going to need to modify the core extension as well as the web view. So I explicitly say that here, and then I say, please review it, and you'll note we're in plan mode. And so once we have, there we go. Once we have the plan, we can execute on it. or once we prompt it, it'll actually go through and build the plan for us. So this might be slightly sped up, but 3.7 is really fast. So here it is going through, it's looking through files in the code base, trying to find information required to actually implement this. So I did this earlier today. This is all recorded, a few hours before the event, of course, plenty of time. So it went through it, looked through our web view. So this is what it looks like, and then we also have our shared state, which is between the extension and the front end. And so it's going to go through, it's going to develop this carefully thought out plan where it explains how it's going to implement it, some of the specific code examples. And I will say I was pretty surprised how good the plan was. I think that 3.7 is pretty cool, at least for code. So here you can see this is some of the visuals that it's designing. And then at the end, it's even going to make a diagram of what it should kind of look like, which is pretty cool. So now that we have a plan, sometimes I'll ask questions, we'll go back and forth. In this case, I think we're pretty happy with it, so I was just like, let's keep going. So let's do it. So now Cline can just go totally autonomously. Now that we have a plan, it's going to go and start editing files left and right. Now, the more complicated the change, the more I'm going to want to be involved in the process. Here, I'm letting it completely do everything on its own. If I'm doing something in production, I might maybe check what it's actually coding every time. I find that is a good idea. But for small features like this, you can pretty much just let it go off. The more in-depth the plan, the more time you spend thinking about it and understanding the plan, the higher the likelihood that it'll actually execute effectively. So here, it looks like it's editing the web view, so it's making that front-end change. And then soon it'll be done. Which, I'm not using any MCP servers in this particular demo, but I'm pretty excited about that because I can Google search for stuff from Cline, and Cline can actually go and fetch information about our code base, and then boom, we're done. So it just went through and implemented it. And again, this is real time. I mean, it's a video, but still. So here we're gonna hot reload, run the extension, and I drag it in. So we can see in the OpenRouter provider, we've got our changes, and they're in the extension, all within about 6 or 8 minutes, something like that. So I'm particularly excited about where we're going. This is of course, a pretty small demo. I need to be able to do it in a rapid time frame. But the more we get into this, the more we're seeing that it's possible for us to build really advanced features. And part of the challenge is getting the right context to do that. And because Cline can go and search through the repo and search it like you or I might, it's able to find the answers it needs to solve pretty complex problems. So it can search for API docs, it can build tools like with CodeGen, it can build a Google search tool, which is one of my most used tools. And the big advantage of Cline is because it's an open source client, all of the data stays between you and whatever provider you're using. So if you're using AWS Bedrock, it's between you and Bedrock, so we don't ever get to touch your data. That's why it's secure. We also don't train on your data, unlike all of our competitors. Anyway, if you have any questions, I'm ready to take questions now. Woo!
Can you talk about the prompts and maybe I'll give some background real quick on what I'm after and why, and then come back to the question. So I've been a heavy Cline user for the last few months, and I think it would really help with my usage to have maybe some concept of what you are and are not doing currently, like what you plan to do, and things that come to mind are what type of code, emulation, debugging, what obviously you're doing linting, but what else is going on? Do you kind of get the gist of what I'm after here?
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Or at least I think so. Get out of the speaker line. Yeah, I mean, let's start with the prompting part of that. So Cline has access to a lot of your directory and file tree structure. So that means it has a good understanding of your code base from a high stroke. And of course, it has access to a lot of VS Code's APIs. So that means that it gets access to linting, all the debugging stuff. I think that's critical because the faster we can get feedback, the faster it actually can debug whatever the issue is. I think a lot of what we're working on is surrounding context management right now. So figuring out how to be more rapid in the process of finding these files and then also getting the most up-to-date information. I think that's like the key roadmap items. Yeah, maybe some of the question. Anyone else? I might have you just tell me and then I'll repeat it. Yeah.
If I make some MCP tool, then I can hook it up to Cline and ask it.
Yeah, so MCP is Model Context Protocol. It was developed by Anthropic as a standard for us to make tools for AI. So it's advantageous because very quickly, server's a misnomer. It's really just like a process that runs on your computer that Cline can access. And it's very arbitrary, so that's why people, like I didn't understand it until I started using it. I'm like, what is this? But I can make arbitrary tools. I can have files, like prompts that I can pull back into Cline. So for example, we have our marketplace, which I could maybe just show real quick, assuming I have it open. And so there are a lot of tools that you can use. So you can like interact with SendGrid. I really recommend the Firecrawl one as a great example. It allows you to crawl through a website and get all of the information from any web page. So this is great for documentation. You can just give the link to Cline. Cline will immediately understand it. It's infinitely extensible. Cline actually has training in making these servers. So the other demo I typically do is just making an MCP server from scratch to do something like Google search, which is pretty easy to get started.
So would it be possible to have it or Cline make MCP servers on an old computer you have, or Raspberry Pi, like let's say you have a bunch of old computers, like
Yeah.
I want to have a bunch of these tools on this computer, I want to have a bunch of these tools, like here I'm giving you everything, like so you don't need to like reach another server and pay, but
Yeah.
like host it yourself basically.
So right now, MCP is actually on your computer. It's a node process, so it's not really a server. It's kind of confusing branding.
Connect it to another computer, or like because offloading resources to another computer.
I know technically the protocol should support remote servers, but it hasn't really been done before, so I'm waiting for that ourselves. Anthropic says it's on the way, roadmap item.
Yeah, so I have a question. So Cline has a knowledge base of the entire code repository and directory structure. Can we make a API call outside of it?
Yes. So that's kind of what MCP provides, is the ability to make any external resource accessible. And you can make a fetch call in a tool call, so you can access your database. Looking here, Airtable being another good example of that, because where you can access your Airtable resources from within Cline. So primarily, we focus on information required to understand the code base at large. If you want to get specific, Cline has to go and find that information. That preserves the context window, so we get only the narrow information required to solve whatever the problem is. Have you tried 3.7 yet? No. It's like twice as fast. So in the demo where it starts going through and reading files, it was almost too fast. Like I thought about slowing it down so that I could talk over it and not run out of time. So it's like getting faster day by day. I think the bigger the context window, the slower the results. It's something to do with compute. The bigger the context window, the much larger the compute is required. So definitely the harder the problems you try to solve, the longer it's going to take for now, at least. Maybe one more?
Just about the agent that you're using.
Yeah.
Are there certain like LLMs that work really well, or LLMs that like don't work with the kind of agent that you're using? And then also,
Yeah.
are you doing anything parallel? Like, for example,
Sure. So 2 questions. One is, what LLMs are best, and then the other thing is, are we doing anything in parallel? So first, I basically only recommend Sonnet. I think 89% of our users or something are just using Sonnet right now. Some of the other bigger frontier models can work and you can use them, but open source models usually can't handle the context we're putting through. We take a very context forward approach. The more context you can cram in there and have it be successful, the better the code generation in the end. So as far as doing things in parallel, it's a roadmap item. I don't think in order to do things in parallel well, we need to do things single-threaded very well. And so I think we're very focused on getting the single-threaded version great, and then we'll keep going from there. But I think that's it for me. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to do this again, so I appreciate you all for coming, and come to our next event in like a month or whenever we plan it. Thank you. And drink all of our drinks, please. Sweet.